Mel Gibson obviously has he's been in some of the greatest movies of all time, but he's also directed some of the greatest movies of all time. And I have to imagine you guys spent a lot of time talking to him. What did you get advice, or just what did you sort of soak up about direction from talking to Mel?
Everything we could. We pumped that guy the entire shoot and post, pumped him constantly. I mean, I think when you have a guy like that, I mean, you gotta try to get as much out of him as you can. I mean, he was forthcoming at times, but I mean, not, we got a lot more out of him than we should have, because we just kept after him, and we just kept asking him tons of questions about, some of our favorite movies that not only he starred in, but that he shot, or that he's directed. And I mean, there were some wonderful lessons that we got in post as well. He was telling us about this cool thing in Braveheart where we were like, oh, how'd you shoot this? And how'd you shoot that? And what'd you do there? And what'd you do this? And he was like, oh, because there's a cool moment in Braveheart where, just a small example, there's a cool moment in Braveheart where he's killing all the, I think, people on the Senate that went up against him and voted to kill him and stalk him or to track him down. And he starts going through all those guys and taking them out. And there's this one scene where one of the guys is in bed, and he has this dream that William Wolfe comes through his door on a horse and I think hits him in the face with a mace or something like that. And he wakes up scared. He goes, oh, thank God that was a nightmare. And then William Wallace really does come through the wall or the door with a mace and hits him in the face. And you get to see some of the gore there. And it's just a flash of it, but it's enough to make you go, oh my God. And it's such a great moment. It's such a great effect. We were like, how did you shoot that? We were like, because you can't, it's seemingly all one shot. And so he just kind of broke down for us about how he double printed these frames and how they swapped out this head. And like, he was just giving us like real practical ways that he did some of these effects in camera, because we love in camera effects because they always seem to look a little bit better, and if you do have a mistake on those practical effects, you kind of want to doctor them up in post, and that's it. You don't want a full digital effect, because it just kind of looks like a mess. Or unreal. So we were pumping him for a lot of that stuff, because we were doing a lot of in-camera stuff. We were working with a lot of guns, and he was having to handle a lot of guns, as was Walton. And just every trick we could get out of him, or every scene that had any relation to what we were shooting and didn't have a relation, we were pumping him about it. If we dug it, we were like, how did you do this? How did you shoot that? And then in post, sorry, I was
just going to ask, did he have any sort of general advice about filmmaking that you thought was particularly valuable, or something that you wish you'd known 10 years earlier, or something like that?
I'll say that there was
a couple. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ash. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's a couple instances, right? Well, there was one where we were going kind of out of our way to get a clean sound. Okay. And he was, I don't worry about that yet.
I think you're breaking up, Ash.
Yeah, Ash breaking up a little bit.
We have one opportunity to shoot a picture. Right. You guys handle it.
Okay. I can tell that story. I know it. So I know what he's talking about. So there was this moment where we were trying to get a really clean take for sound, and what that meant is that we, that you had to basically not shoot Mel's side, for the guy to dip in with the boom mic or whatever. And I remember that we actually wanted to roll on it, and then the sound guy was nervous about it, didn't want us to roll on it, and it was a big confusion. But ultimately, Mel came afterwards, like, man, you guys do not want to shoot. He's like, you want to shoot as much of the visuals as you can. He's like, because we're not going to be able to come back and get that. He's like, if you sacrifice a take for sound, he's like, I mean, come on, we could rebuild the sound and do all that in post in LA or wherever at any time. He's like, but we cannot rebuild the visual anywhere. So he's like, and that I think went along with a bigger theme of not compromising, right? Which, I mean, there's always little compromises you're making along the way, but to compromise anything that you really want in the movie, which ends up being really like your voice in the movie. So like, get the visuals you need and try not to compromise as much as possible, because that really is your voice. That's what makes you original. That's what makes you stand out. I mean, that was one of the big ones there.
Yeah. He also wants to know what lens is on every camera all the time. which is really cool. And honestly, like we've had actors ask us that, but never to the degree that Mel queried about it. And I remember at one point he came in and he was like, "Oh, hey, what's that lens on that camera back there?" And we're like, "Oh, I think that's our long lens." And he's like, "Oh, what is that, like a 75, 80?" I go, "You know what? It's around there. I got to go ask Johnny, the DP." And he goes, "What's that one?" We go, "Oh, that's more of our normal." And he was like, "Okay, what's the millimeter on that?" And so we went and asked Johnny. And then we came back in the next step. He asked us the exact same thing. I know what because we're looking at the monitor, we're framing up the shots, we storyboard every frame of the movie, but we didn't know exactly what millimeter to the millimeter every lens was. And Mel wants to know those details. He's a detail oriented guy, and like honestly, like nothing gets past him on the set.
Yeah. So one of our producer asked me this question. I think it's an interesting area, and then you guys are obviously working on a lot of projects right now. I'd be curious to know if you have any thoughts on the kind of the state of the industry. And one of the things that Pavel asked me here was about film versus digital, and if you guys have any preferences. We already talked a little bit about a preference towards in-camera effects and things like that, but how do you feel about just the state of the technology?
I think the tech's never been better. Ian and I enjoy the filmic look. I haven't found a lot of high frame rate stuff that I like yet.
Yeah.
We have never shot a movie on film.
Yeah.
I don't know that we ever will. It's so when you get down to breaking down the budget, it just demands so much money and resources, and risking scratch prints and things like that. I don't know that it'll be ever worth it for us, but
there's also
the digital revolution we fully embraced.
There's also an incredible versatility with digital that you don't have with film right off the bat. And like Esh was saying, like you got to go process it, develop it, and then turn it digital. Whereas we've had a lot of I wouldn't say good fortune, but it's like we've had a lot of luck with the way that we wanted our film to look, and then our DP Johnny coming in and saying, "Well, I think we can do that if we do this." And it's not that we're trying to avoid film; it's just that the look we really enjoy, we've been able to make it work with digital, with either like filmic, filters, and then a certain color correction. And then, it's like, why risk for us? It's like, why risk, the complications / budget overages of having film and shooting film, and the complications that could happen, just with chemicals. Eshom and I grew up, our dad was a photographer for 20 some odd years. Both our parents were. And we know firsthand how easy, film can be screwed up, if you just have the wrong chemical mix in the water. The
developer's not right or whatever. Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that person is inexperienced, whether that they made a mistake or, this much, half a cup of this went in or a fourth a cup of that went in instead of this or that, or because you're still working in dark rooms. You're still working in like tough environments, and you're looking for precision. So you're never going to get, I don't know. It's easier to get that precision when you're trying to dial it digitally. And we're just skipping a few steps of having to shoot film, transfer it to digital, and then start screwing with it. So it just makes sense for us.
But when we got into film, the transition had already happened, but our roadmap was always going to be digital because the film had already kind of died by the time we got in.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch, especially the last 10 years or so, the shift. I mean, even the studio that Paul and I are in here, we have cameras that, would be perfectly appropriate to shoot, shorts and things like that on. And 10 years ago, that just wouldn't have even really been possible. I mean, I think the kind of stuff that's available today, at prices that are actually achievable, is pretty wild. I mean, we have an Arri Alexa in here, for goodness sakes. An older one at this point. But this is a camera that maybe was $85,000 a few years ago. That now is I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean
10 or so. But yeah.
So kind of going off that, with the technology being so good and so cheap, what's your best piece of advice for a filmmaker wanting to get into this or start their career? Would it be focused more on the like videography, cinematography, or more writing, or both? What do you guys think?
I think you need all of
Well,
it.
it depends on what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be a cinematographer, then the technology and the cameras are of paramount importance. If you want to be a filmmaker, but I think in the beginning, Ian and I had to be very tech forward because we were making our own stuff, and so you have to have a knowledge of the cameras and the editing software and all that, and the codecs and all that stuff to make it all agree. Johnny Durango, our cinematographer, who we shot the last 4 movies with, and a lot of that technological burden has been gladly shifted to him. And when we're like, I don't, it changes so fast. The lifespan of these cameras is so ephemeral. You read a manual for one and it's obsolete the next month. So it's like, you can't even, it's just, these folks, these ACs, they're saints for trying to keep up with that.
Yeah.
I'd say for young filmmakers, or for not even young filmmakers, people making films, honestly, because I think the first struggles that we had were, okay, how do we write something that's entertaining? Let's work on make this entertaining. And that should be your first goal. It should be entertaining, whether you're shooting it on your iPhone, you're shooting it on an Arri Alexa, or you're shooting on anything. Like, try to figure out how to make your stories work, whether they're dramatic, funny, action, whatever. Like, try to figure out how to have good writing and good characters and have people care about them. And then what happened to us is we made 2 feature films and probably a dozen short films that Eshom and I wrote, directed, and shot. And we're our own cameramen and did our own lighting with help from our dad at times. And we learned a ton. We learned a ton about the basics, the bare bones basics of making movies. And our writing got a lot better. Like, we became better writers because we kept making stuff. Now, there was one point where we've been friends with Johnny Durango since we started making films. Eshom and Johnny started making safety videos together back in the early 2000s. And Eshom was running cable and coffee for Johnny as he was DPing these safety videos in skyscrapers in LA. And it was just a commercial, crappy job. But you're getting paid to make, you're getting paid to make movies, make infomercial, make safety videos, whatever you can get your hands on. And Johnny came over and he'd watched everything we'd made, and he came over and watched, I think it was Night of the Dog, which was our second feature. And he said, "Do you know what the problem with this movie is?" And we were like, "What?" He's like, "That I didn't shoot it." And he was absolutely right, because we were like, all right, well, let's see about that. Because Eshom and I were shooting it. We're like, "Oh, you think you can do better with, $800? Let's see what you got, buddy." And so we teamed up with him and went and shot a short film, which was like the pilot for a web series, basically, that a friend of ours had written, Jen Fee. And she'd done a killer job on this. And we were like, okay, well, we want to shoot this. And she brought us on to direct it. And we brought Johnny on to help us DP it. And it was Eshom and I directing, one of us holding the boom or holding the camera. And or I guess at that point, Johnny was holding the camera, but one of us holding the boom or standing behind camera, directing the actors. And then Johnny was doing lighting, and so it was a 3-man crew, basically. And that was the same dynamic we'd had on those first 2 features, is that there was like a 3-man crew. But this time, Johnny brought his camera. Johnny brought his lights. Johnny rented a light and rented a lens. And we were like, "Do you really need to rent a light and rent a lens? Come on, man." And I mean, for people, we were making like a $900 webisode. And for us, that $200 that we spent to rent that light and rent that lens for the day, because I think we shot 2 days, was like astronomical. We were just like, "You just added $200 to a $900 budget. Like, is this absolutely necessary?" And he's like, "Hey, do you want depth of field? Do you want to be able to see your actors? Do you want dynamic lighting?" And we're like, "All right, we'll put up $200. Let's see how this goes." So, the quality was astronomically different. I mean, it was like we went from, if you were judging it, you'd be like,
YouTube
"Oh yeah, that
video."
like a homemade YouTube video, to like, "Oh, this could probably pop up on Showtime, and you'd buy it as a real show, or it would pop up on." FX or something, and you'd be like, "Yep, this is a professionally made product."
Well,
it has
I think we kind of went from like. It was definitely. I mean, we weren't YouTube series, but it was pretty rough around the edges, and we knew just enough to be dangerous in our writing skills.
Yeah, but Johnny brought a whole new element to the game, and it just showed, and it just looked really professional. It looked like a great product. It looked like a real movie, you would say, quote unquote. And that was a huge step for us, because now, I won't say we were the greatest writers, but we were definitely entertaining. We were winning film festivals. We were winning audience awards and writing awards at film festivals. So, I mean, we were pretty good. We knew how to write entertaining stuff. And then with his extra level of just production value of what he brought, just in know-how and a couple of $100, it was night and day. It was night and day. And then he went and shot on. He's gone on to shoot our next 4 features, and we've all grown and leveled up together. And it's been a really incredible experience, because we have such a shorthand with that guy. We literally call him the third Nelms brother at this point, because he's so integral to our work. And it's funny, after when we were shooting Fatman, Mel was like, "Who's shooting this?" And we're all, "Johnny Durango. We shot the last 3." He's like, "Is that his real name?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's his real name." But by the end of the shoot, Mel, and in post and everything, Mel watched the film, was really impressed with how it looked. And, Mel's literally courting Johnny to shoot his next movie. So we were like, "All right, wait a minute. Johnny, you still got to leave your calendar open for us." But it's just a testament to how hard that guy works. And that's what you do across the board, right? You pick people that are working, as hard as you hope that you're working, right? You're spending your soul and your heart on this thing, and you got to find those collaborators that are in it as hard as you are, because at the end of the day, that's, you're as strong as your weakest link. And if somebody's not going as hard as you are, it shows, and that department or that place suffers. And, we really try to surround ourselves with people that are killing themselves to make this thing. And whether that's because they believe in the product, or it's because they want to do a great job because they're trying to learn to make their features later, that's what's important. People that work hard like that, they succeed and they push through and they find a way to pop out from what we've seen.